All right, let's get started with a little Wildfire Insider. So what I do in these kind of videos, the Wildfire Insider ones, is they're a bit less formal than my usual update and forecasts on wildfire in California because it's usually when I haven't done my research yet. So this is just a live stream where we'll kind of be doing the research live and trying to figure out what's going on with wildfire in California together. And you can see just based on this map that there is a bit more activity than what we have seen really at any other time this year. This year we've been off to a pretty great start. We had lots of rainfall this last winter. The drought comparison had some massive improvements. And because of that, there's a lot more moisture in our fuels. So we've been below average in wildfire activity so far, but as you probably know, there was some lightning activity over the last couple of days, and that started a lot of these fires up in Northern California. So we can just zoom in here. You can see there's a number of ones going on. It doesn't look like anything has gotten too large just yet. Looks like there's a lot of aircraft down here on what's called the slide fire. So we can click this. That one's slide fire is 289 acres, 0% containment. Fire was active overnight. Structures are threatened. And so layers. We can't go structures on this map, but maybe we could do it over here. Let's go all satellites. So I believe that's the fire we're looking at right there. Yeah, unfortunately one of our maps doesn't show where the structures are, and then the other one doesn't show the name of the fire. So we're just gonna do our best here. So that one looks like there's some, the orange dots are the structures. Looks like we got some structures to the east of that fire. Then you can see this fire up here in Northern California, some structures just to the right of that. We've got this fire. So there was a number of different fires that started. That one, again, that doesn't look like the worst of them. 289 acres. Definitely have some air attack on that. We've got the pilot fire, which is 15 acres. The deep fire, which is 800 acres. Lone Pine fire, 352 acres. SKU August Lightning Complex, 632 acres. And then up in very northern parts of California, that's where you can see that's one of the larger fires that we've had so far this year, Head Fire. Doesn't look like there's too much of an air attack on that right now, so that might tell you that that's away from a lot of the structures. There we go. It's finally starting to label some of the fires here. So that's the Head Fire. Actually, it does look like there's some structures over on the northwestern side of that, but it looks like the current heat is being picked up on the northeastern side of the fire. So how this works is the yellow is your fire perimeter. Those little red dots are where the recent hotspots were, and then where you see the red square, that's where you're currently picking up some heat from the satellites. So Head Fire right there, it at least looks like the fire is moving in the right direction, so away from some of those structures, but it definitely looks like we still have a lot of evacuations in place. Evacuation orders, evacuation warnings for all those areas. Link for watch duties in the description of this video if you want access to this. So that's 2,705 acres, 0% containment. Got some evacuation notes there, and perfect. This is just what we need, a nice little morning update from Klamath National Forest. Firefighters were engaged in point direction during the night on the Head Fire, working to protect homes in the Steelhead area, Scott River Road, and the Highway 96 corridor. The fire was flown last night and was around 2,700 acres at that time. Fire behavior decreased around 9 p.m. Resources continue to arrive from out of the area to engage in the firefighting effort. A Type 1 incident management team has been ordered for the incident. Road closures are in effect for Highway 96 and Scott River Road. And then always important to obey evacuation orders and warnings. Main reason for that is The firefighters want to protect your homes and they want to stop the fire, but if they have to be concerned about helping people evacuate or going into places where people haven't evacuated yet, it actually just distracts them from saving your home. So it's the last thing that you would want as a homeowner, is to distract the firefighters from doing the job that you want them to do. So let's go back and let's see what this one up here is. So that's the SRF Smith River Complex. That one's 620 acres. Let's see if we could find that on CalTopo to see if that one's near any structures. Looks like we got a couple fires down here as well. Those must be somewhat new because we're not seeing the perimeters on it yet. That one's the Holiday Fire. Not seeing a whole lot of structures near that one. And also not seeing that on the Watch Duty app yet. So that's interesting. We're trying to compile all the different information we can find here to figure out what's going on in California. A lot of structures up here. Good thing we're not seeing as much fire activity in that area. These are the fires we're looking for. So that's Bedrock Fire. That one might actually be it's a good way to do it. Actually, let's check out Deep Fire before I go to this next link. Deep Fire update from Shasta Trinity. This fire was called the Upper Fire yesterday, but has been renamed to the Deep Fire. Yesterday afternoon and evening, the fire was heavily impacted by a thunderstorm that sat over the top of the Deep Fire and caused erratic fire behavior and growth. So what happens there is if you have a thunderstorm, you can get very erratic winds around it, and then that can push the fire in all sorts of different directions. It can also lead to some lightning, which we know is a part of the reason a lot of the fires have popped up. This morning and afternoon, the Deep Fire is estimated at nearly 800 acres. The fire is smoked in, and as a result, we are not able to get an updated picture this morning. Sometimes it can actually be helpful when the fire is smoked in, because then you get less sunlight coming in to heat up the surface during the day, and it can almost lead to a negative feedback loop, where if a fire is burning so intensely that it creates all this smoke, then the next day, when you can't have sunlight coming in, the ground doesn't heat up as much, which doesn't create as many winds throughout the day, and then it can actually diminish fire activity. We've seen that a couple times, so hopefully that's what's going on the Deep Fire right now, but it doesn't look like we have any good views of what's going on there at the moment. Now, another good thing to do is just look at the satellite imagery. Sometimes when you can't figure out where fires are, this is the best way to try to see. And it looks like we might have more thunderstorm activity popping up into the Sierra throughout the day today. Let's see if we can put on some radar here. Yeah, wait for it. This is going to get into this afternoon. Ground's heating up. Let's go right there. And then you start to see some of those thunderstorms popping up in the Sierra again. So I'm not seeing any real smoke on the ground, but it does seem like most of the fires that we're looking at are up in Northern California, and that's where you can actually see some of the smoke coming off of. So it looks like it's mostly up almost on the Oregon border right here. And then something else we can do is if you go natural color fire, that's where you can actually see, if you look very closely, you can see where there's some bright red showing up, and that's where the fires are. We'll go back to the start because it's actually easier to see it at nighttime sometimes. See that little puck right there, that little puck right there, and then we weren't seeing that much heat coming off of the fire right on the Oregon border last night. But then you can see as we get into the afternoon, you're going to notice a bit more smoke coming off of those fires. Overall, though, I wouldn't say it looks like it's burning that hot right now. Although, there's definitely some smoke coming off of it, but it doesn't look like it's at the stage yet where it's out of control or anything like that. And something we can do is actually see if we can look at the fires themselves. Okay. So now we're just going to be, looks like you can see some of those bigger clouds coming through. Might be some of the thunderstorm activity. Let's zoom in over here. Yeah, you notice there's not a whole lot of cameras up in the northwestern portion of California, just because that's not where we have the largest amount of structures up there. But definitely have some of that heat activity coming off now. So let's see. Other thing we can do is check if there's any red flag warnings. That's just your instant indication that you have some high fire danger out there. And clicking in, it does look like we have some warnings in California right now. We've got the excessive heat warning, which is in purple, and then you also have the red flag warning, which is more in pink, and then we had the heat advisory going through the whole Central Valley. So let's just look at the red flag warning. So isolated to scattered thunderstorms expected this week. Red flag warning remains in effect until 11 p.m. this evening, and it's Wednesday today, for abundant lightning on dry fuels for fire weather zones. Red flag in effect from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. Thursday for abundant lightning on dry fuels for fire weather zones. National Weather Service in Medford has issued a red flag warning 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. Thursday. Any fires that develop have a high probability of spreading rapidly. Abundant lightning can also ignite new fires and strain firefighting resources. So scattered thunderstorms, this is the most important part right here. What it's saying about the thunderstorm possibility. So scattered thunderstorms are expected this afternoon and evening. Then isolated showers and thunderstorms are expected overnight into Thursday morning, followed by additional scattered thunderstorms Thursday afternoon and evening. Storms will be a hybrid of wet and dry today. So wet is often better because then you reduce your chance for a fire starting, because if maybe lightning sparks somewhere, then the rain just puts it out. It's the dry lightning that we usually worry about, because that doesn't bring any moisture to the fuels. As this report was already saying, there are some dry fuels out there, and then it could start a fire. Now, just because there is lightning, though, it's not a guarantee that fire is going to start. I actually have my textbook with me right here, and let's see if I can find the fact that says, so it says what percent of lightning causes fire. Oh, I found it. So lightning is a natural ignition source that is unevenly distributed across the state. Talking about California, from 1985 through 2000, over 1 million lightning strikes were detected in California. Nearly half of those struck in the southeastern deserts, where you're not going to have that much fire just because there's not much fuel in the desert. Although our largest fire of the year so far was in the desert. Burned down some of the Joshua trees. So lightning strikes peak in the interior mountain ranges in August. So that's exactly where we are right now, and we are seeing some lightning activity, which has led to some of the fires that have been popping up. So lightning strikes peak in August. During 6 years, 7,250 strikes were detected inside Yosemite National Park, ranging from 530 to 2,000 per year, and focused primarily from June through September. So right there, the important information to take out is August seems to be the month where we get the most lightning activity, and big part of the reason for that is you get hurricanes off of Mexico, and then that funnels in some of the moisture into California, which is where our thunderstorm activity is coming from in large part today. So it looks like there might be another hurricane down off of Mexico, and that could be pushing more moisture in. What we can do is check out California, go to the water vapor imagery, and then we can see where this moisture is coming from. Yeah, it looks like it's still coming down from Mexico. You see how it's pushing into the state, and then once that moisture pushes into the mountains, start to get some of the thunderstorm activity, and then that's where you get some of the lightning strikes. So, Yosemite National Park, ranging from 500 to 2,000 per year and focused primarily from June through September. California's Central Coast, however, has the lowest incidence of lightning strikes anywhere in the country. That's pretty interesting. Central Coast, lowest amount of lightning strikes anywhere in the country. So that tells you how rare the CZU lightning complex was that we had in August of 2020. It was around this exact same time. It might even be the 3-year anniversary of that today. When we had Tropical Storm Fausto, it was off of the coast of Mexico, funneled in a bunch of moisture into California, and it started hundreds of fires all over the state. Luckily, we're not seeing anything out there right now that looks like it's that intense as what we had there, but that is always the concern in August. So this is the paragraph that I was looking for. I'm reading my textbook. So most strikes do not start a fire. The coast ranges experience more of their lightning during the winter and spring when fuels are wetter, so those lightning strikes are less likely to start a fire. So that would be maybe from your winter storms that come down and create some lightning for the coast ranges. But when your fuels are wet, it doesn't really matter if you get some lightning. Only 5% of the detected Yosemite strikes ignite fire. So that's the fact that I was looking at. So they had a study that looked at 7,000 strikes in Yosemite from, what was the time? It might be 1985 to 2000. And only 5% of those ignited fires. Dry lightning storms are more likely to ignite fires than summer monsoonal thunderstorms, which coincide with rain in the deserts and the Sierra Nevada. So that's what we're looking for, that little fact right there. 5% of lightning strikes can result in a fire. So anytime you hear lightning's coming, it does kind of ring the alarm bells out there, but it's also not a guarantee that you're going to have some fires popping up. Although looking at the map of California, we do have some fires popping up. So one other thing we can do, CAL FIRE usually has the best list of current incidents. So this year we've had 4,000 wildfires, 114,000 acres burned, unfortunately 3 fatalities and 20 structures, 8 damaged, 12 destroyed. They're showing 4 fires up in Northern California. That's a little bit easier to see than some of the maps that we were looking at earlier. What about 5-year fire history? So this is important because a fire is not going to burn very much where there's fire history. So that one, the slide fire. Let's see if we see it. Slide fire. It's external information. Date started. Looks like that was started today at 8:35 a.m. Cause under investigation. That's one view of it. Here's a second view of it. Not really seeing all that much smoke coming off it just yet. Although those pictures look like they're taken a little bit earlier in the day. And not seeing any information on how many acres burned with that one so far. But if you look at the shading around that one, that has a lot of fire history directly around it. So where there's fire history, that would have burned out some of the fuels in the past, so then there's less fuel to burn right now, which is good news. Now where we don't see as much fire history is on the deep fire. Looks like there's a lot of open area around that one. And then a lot of open area around the SKU August Lightning Complex, and it looks like the Klamath National Forest Lightning Complex as well. Now, just to be sure, you can go in here. So there's your slide fire. It actually looks like there is some open area to the northwest of this fire right here. If you look at the wind directions, see those little vectors on here. Those are coming from the northeast, so that would try to push the fire, and that would try to push the fire to the west right here. And then if we come into this map, let's see if we can find the slide fire to see if there's any structures around it. Yeah, that one started today, so it's not going to have a fire perimeter yet. And usually we need fire perimeters in order to find it on the CalTopo website. So, yeah, it looks like they have some aircraft on that one. USFS Jumper 52. And yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that. Then we have Klamath National Forest Lightning Complex. Actually, let's look at the dates around here, because just because there's fire history doesn't mean the fuels are gone. More than 2 years, if it's in a grassy area, a lot of that grass is going to burn back. I heard Zeke Lunder talking about this morning. And then in a brush area, it might be 10 years. Forest area would be longer than brush. But it does look like around the slide fire, it's a lot of recent fire history. Sid in 2021, South in 2019, Doe in 2020. And the Doe fire looks like it burned all around the southern side of the slide fire. So not seeing as much potential on that one, although there is a little room for it to burn to the west. And right now, it's hard to see if there's some structures in there. So we'll keep an eye on that one. And then we've got Deep Fire up here. Let's see if Cal Fire has some information on the Deep Fire. That one started, looks like that one started this morning at 8:28 a.m. as well. And, Cal Fire did an update to the website, and I think I like the old version more. And then finally, Klamath National Forest Lightning Complex, which is the one way up there. And we could put on red flag warnings on this map, so you can see what fires are currently under the red flag warnings. That's going to be your SKU, August Lightning Complex, Deep Fire, and the Klamath National Forest Lightning Complex. So where you have red flag warning, that's where there's the potential for some thunderstorms, dry fuels, some windy conditions. And, we can actually check out the chances for some thunderstorm activity. When we were reading that red flag warning, it sounded like that's mostly tomorrow. So let's click up in here. Yeah, it looks like it's pretty dry out there right now. That's a 14% relative humidity. So even though we were looking at some moisture flowing into California, doesn't look like it's bringing a whole lot of humidity with it. A lot of times when you get those tropical systems, it brings in mid-level moisture, which leads to thunderstorms, but then it doesn't lead to a lot of moisture on the ground. It's still pretty dry out there, and you can see why it's dry, because it's very hot, and hot air can hold a lot more moisture. So as the air expands, your relative humidity might go from 40% down to 14%. Redding's 111 degrees today. Chico's 111 degrees today. That's why when we're looking at the National Weather Service, let's see if we can go back here. California has the heat advisory throughout the Central Valley, excessive heat warning up in the northwestern portion of the state, and then the pink is your red flag warning. Looks like it continues into Southern California as well. So that's your humidity. It's dry out there. Those are your temperatures. So it's very hot out there. And then the last factor would be wind. Because when you're looking at fire danger, you always look at if it's hot, dry, and windy. And that's actually one factor that's kind of working in our favor. You've maybe noticed this the last couple days, but it hasn't been that windy in California unless you're underneath one of those thunderstorms, and that was something we read about on one of the fires. But right now, we're looking at wind gusts, and the highest I've been able to see is maybe 25, 27 miles per hour, and then there's some places where your gusts are 12 miles per hour. And keep in mind that that's talking about gusts, so if you just look at sustained winds are very minimal in California right now. So I think that's maybe the best information that we've been able to find so far, because it's not a very windy pattern over California, so that's going to limit how extreme these wildfires get, because we are getting into the season where a lot of the fuels have dried out. which means there's the potential for fire. It's very hot out there, very dry out there today, which makes it more likely for the fires to spread. But when you have windy conditions, that's, I would say, what leads to more extreme wildfire and in a lot of the really big fires that we see. But anytime it's over 100 degrees and your relative humidity's in the teens, you can get some growth, especially if you're in an area with a lot of slope where the fire can just push uphill very rapidly. So let's look at some thunderstorms. And yeah, this will actually show where there's the potential for some lightning too. So that's showing it right now. It's showing some lightning activity throughout the Sierra from South Lake Tahoe through Mammoth, and then also some up in Northern California. I believe this is based on models though. So let's see if we can actually just find satellite radar lightning loop. This might be able to show us where there's actually some lightning going on. Okay. Looks like we do have some activity on the radar right here. Oh. Not sure what's going on with our map. Maybe I have too many links going right now. Might have to close some of these links out. Yep, so yeah, we have some thunderstorm activity. Maybe some lightning starting to pop up. You're going to have a bit more as you get later into the afternoon. That link's not very good though, so we're just going to ignore that for now. So this shows your thunderstorm activity this afternoon based on the model. You notice by 8 p.m. a lot of it calms down because your temperatures finally start to drop, and then you have less rising air, which is what often leads to those thunderstorms. But we are going to see that potential pop back up again tomorrow because we're reading the red flag warnings. We're actually more for Thursday. So we get into 2 p.m. tomorrow. You see some of those thunderstorms start to pop back up again. And then into 5 p.m. still going on. And then they start to die down by 8 p.m. So let's look at the wind gusts expected around 5 p.m. Yeah, that's where you get some gustier conditions, maybe around 25 to 30 miles per hour. Main thing that I'll be looking at though is where you have a thunderstorm, you're going to get locally gusty winds. So let's just come back to National Weather Service. I think we've looked at a lot of the fires that we have out there right now pretty well. I'll just take a look at the live stream. Let's see. Alright, so there was another site that I wanted to check out. This is a new one. This is called Cal Matters. And it has a lot of good wildfire information. I was starting to look at it this morning, and then I thought, you know what? This could actually just be a great site for me to read live, because I'm sure everything I'm going to be reading right here is information that would interest anybody in California who's interested in wildfire. So let's check out what this new website has to offer. So there's our wildfire map right here. Oh, this is actually the best setup of current wildfire information that's going on. So York Fire, that was the biggest fire that we've had this year. That was 93,000 acres, but that's basically 100% contained at this point. It shows 98. So that one's basically done. Klamath National Forest Lightning Complex, 2,700 acres, 0% containment. We looked at that. SKU, August Lightning Complex, 631 acres, 5% containment. Smith River Complex, 500 acres, 0% containment. That is one that we haven't really looked at yet. Okay, so that's going to be in the very northwestern section, California, where we had a lot of the heat and lightning activity. What about the Lone Pine? That one looks like it's down more in Southern California. Okay, that's a pretty cool resource right there. So here's some of the key numbers that we're looking at across the state. So 20 large wildfires this year where 300 or more acres were burned. And that's an increase of 33% compared to 5-year average of large wildfires year to date. CAL FIRE reports have responded to 4,000 wildfires year to date, but those incidents can vary in scope and significance. So that's interesting. They put large wildfires 300 acres or more. I believe that's the exact number that CAL FIRE uses. I personally, just based on covering some of the big wildfires that we have in California, I use a different definition. Maybe I could use that for large wildfires, but for extreme fire behavior, I usually like to think of burning more than 10,000 acres over a 24-hour period. So that's only going to be your most extreme wildfires of the entire year. Because, I mean, anyone who's been following wildfire in California this year knows that we haven't really had a crazy year so far, at least comparatively speaking. So the fact that we've had 20 large wildfires, I think makes it sound a bit worse than it's actually been. Although, obviously, we've seen things pick up in the last couple days. And then it looks like we're going to continue to see some higher fire danger moving forward. Actually, one thing that I meant to look at the beginning of this video, because I'm very curious to see what's going on here. This is San Jose State Fire Weather Research Laboratory, and this is where I got my master's in meteorology. And they have arguably the best wildfire research program in the world. And one thing that we would do is we would actually go up into the hills and cut fuels. We'd weigh them, we'd dry them out, and then we'd weigh them again. And then that tells you how much moisture was originally in the fuel. So I'm very curious to see how our fuel moisture values are doing right now, because that's going to give us maybe the best indication that we have about how large the wildfire danger out there is. So Blackberry Hill, that's up in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So your blue is going to be your low values. The green is the average values. And then the red is 2023 values. So in May, you can see we were well above average for our fuel moisture. So the more moisture that's in your fuel, the higher percentage you have, means the more water that's in your fuel, which means the less likely a fire is going to start and spread once it does start. So we were off to a terrific start at the beginning of the year. And then you can see as we get into the drier months, as we switched from kind of that cool pattern that we were in to a much warmer pattern over the last month, we see the fuel moisture values start to decrease. And right now we're above average, at least as of their recent reading. Let's just call that average. So we're in a lot better of a situation according to that one. So that's your chemise, which is a type of plant that you often find in the chaparral. It's very flammable. Then let's look at Blackberry Hill chemise new growth. That's where we're great start to the year. Now we're starting to dry out a bit more, and now we're right about average. Chemise old growth, a little bit above average, so that's some good news there, and it's usually the old growth that burns the most. So that is pretty good to see. So let's go to fuel moisture. Yeah, it seems like they've only been doing maybe Blackberry Hill so far. We used to do 3 different sites. And then I also want to look at Drought, California comparison. So that's our drought right now. Not as much out there, although that's actually a key thing to look at today, where our biggest fire danger is in the far northern parts of California, and that is where we do still have some abnormally dry conditions. So that means we didn't pick up as much rainfall there over this last winter. So that could be part of the reason as well that we're starting to see some of these lightning fires pop up, and why we have the red flag warning up there is it's because the fuels are drier up there, because they didn't pick up as much rain this last winter. So that's pretty interesting to see. I want to see if we can actually get the comparison slider though. This is, yeah, this could work. Let's check out California. And let's see if we can do August of last year. August 16, 2022. Wow, look at that difference in drought. So, here's your comparison down here. 16% of the state was in extreme drought, which is that burgundy color. You can see it was in San Joaquin Valley. Now, none of the state is in extreme drought. What about severe drought? That's your bright red color. 43% of the state in 2022, a year ago today. A lot of the Central Valley stretching up into the Oregon border, stretching down into the Central Coast. Now, none of the state is in extreme drought. What about severe drought? 98% of the state was in severe drought a year ago today. Now, 0%. So that's where your orange color is. Pretty much the entire state of California was in severe drought this time last year. Now, nothing. So, why that is important for wildfire, that means there's going to be a lot more moisture in your fuels, which means it's a lot harder for fires to start and spread. What about moderate drought? Almost 100% compared to 7% today. Over here on the kind of southeastern parts of the state gives you an idea why that's where we have seen some wildfire activity, and we did have our largest fire so far this year. I believe it was called the York Fire. That's where most of our acres burned so far this year is from. And then yellow, that's going to be abnormally dry. 100% of the state a year ago. Now, a quarter of the state is abnormally dry, and it's in the portion of the state where we don't have the largest conglomerate of structures. So that, you could argue, is some good news right there. Although, main thing that we're looking at is the heat and the thunderstorm activity over the next couple of days, because that does increase your fire danger out there, and we're seeing it start a few new fires. So, 210,000 minimum acres burned this year involving CAL FIRE or others, down 53% compared to 5-year average of acres burned year to date. So that gives you a good idea of how this year compares to last year and the last 5 years. And that is a big explanation of why we are down 53% in acres burned compared to the 5-year average. So, and the largest wildfire year to date is the York Fire, which has so far burned at least 93,000 acres in the Mojave Desert. So, obviously, wildfires have good and bad impacts wherever they burn. It's usually good for the California ecosystem because a lot of our plants evolved with wildfire, so they actually rely on fire. And it can kind of regenerate almost like a phoenix, where some old tree burns down and then it allows some new sprout to pop up. And there's lots of nutrients on the ground because there's ash. But then it can lead to impacts to life and property. So in the example of the York Fire, that's a place where there's not going to be as many structures, which is good. But then it did burn down some of the Joshua trees, which is not ideal because I don't think those are adapted to wildfire. We'd have to look into that. Key thing I want to point out, though, is about half of our acres burned this year involving CAL FIRE or others has been that one fire, which didn't have that many impacts on life or property. So that's why you maybe haven't heard all that much about wildfire so far this year, is because there hasn't been a whole lot to talk about until maybe the last couple of days, and then over the next couple of days with the thunderstorm possibility. And then it looks like there may be another event coming in on Monday of next week. And let's actually look into that, because they might call me into the station next Monday. That's what they're talking about, to cover some of this thunderstorm possibility. Let's see. So we definitely have some thunderstorms out there right now. Looks like there's some thunderstorm activity tomorrow. What about Friday? Some more thunderstorm activity, mostly northern California. Although, seeing some maybe on the very southeastern border of California and Arizona. Saturday, looks like we still have some thunderstorm activity. Sunday, still up in northern California. And Monday. So there's your low off of the coast right there. And I have to pay to go out to Tuesday maybe? No. Okay, so we're going to keep an eye on that. Because that's the low that I believe the chief meteorologist I was just talking to was concerned about. Is if that low moves up from Mexico, it could bring some moisture with it and lead to some thunderstorms. But right now, the models aren't showing all that much. But we're definitely going to keep an eye on that because more than 2 days out, I think it's pretty hard to say what a tropical system is going to do as it nears California. So we'll just have to keep our eyes open on that. I do want to check out the National Hurricane Center, though, to see what that one system off of Mexico is. Because that's where we could have some fire danger moving forward. Eastern Pacific. Fernanda. Let's see if we can check out the cone on this. It's going to be moving to the west. So that's good news. It's going to be moving away from Mexico, away from California. But it can still push up some moisture into the state. So, yeah, we'll keep an eye on that one. Now, just going back to this site right here. I want to keep looking at this site because there's just lots of gold nuggets of information on this new calmatters.org. So, unfortunately, 3 wildfire-related fatalities this year. Preliminary data, deadliest year was 2018, where 100 civilians and firefighters were killed in wildfires. 3 firefighters died on August 6th after 2 helicopters collided while combating a fire in Riverside County. 20 structures damaged or destroyed by wildfires this year. Most destructive year was 2018, where more than 24,000 structures were damaged or destroyed by wildfires. So, says, when is fire season in California? California faces the risk of wildfires all year now, particularly in years of extreme drought conditions that leave the state's foliage a tinderbox. Depends on your winter. Obviously, this last winter, we didn't have fire season all year long because we picked up so much rainfall. But then if you have a state that looks like that, that's a year ago today, that's where you could have one of those years where you always have the risk for some wildfire out there. So most fires happen between the months of April and October as weather becomes warmer and drier. In Southern California in particular, the hot and dry Santa Ana winds increase wildfire risk in October and November. So this is something that was actually part of the reason I wanted to do a video today. I read an article, I think it was 2 days ago, that said highest fire risk of the year. And I thought that was maybe a little bit misleading because until November, or until we get our first big rain of the winter, almost every week is going to be the highest fire risk of the year. Because the longer we go into summer, the longer we've had some warm temperatures, the longer we've been without rainfall, the drier the fuels get. Now, obviously, you have some exceptions, like what we are seeing right now, where we have some thunderstorm activity out there leading to some lightning fires, which does increase your fire danger. But in a month from now, the state of California will have higher fire danger than we have right now. And then, really, until we get some good rainfall in November, we'll continue to see fire danger increase. And the reason for that, let's look at Boulder Creek climate data. And let's see if they have, okay, so you can see how your temperatures go up in summer. That's not a big surprise. But the chart I'm looking for is this one. So average monthly rainfall in Boulder Creek. So this explains why California has such bad wildfires. It's because we have a Mediterranean climate. That means that we pick up most of our rainfall during the winter months. So the reason that that's important is because that means you have your driest time of the year during the summer months, which means your fuels are dry at the same time that your temperatures are high. And that leads to fire danger. So in a place like, I believe, Southeast Asia picks up a lot of their rainfall in the summer months. So at the time when they have the biggest risk because of temperature is when they have the lowest risk because of all of the rainfall. California is dry and hot at the same time. And then what this was just talking about is how dry Santa Ana winds increase wildfire risk in October and November. That's why I'm usually more worried about the end of fire season right here than the beginning of fire season. Because you see how much your rainfall dips down, all your fuels are drying out through June, July, August, September, and then you start to get some of the offshore wind events. And what that does is it takes some of the drier air from inland, some of the hot air from inland, leads to some very gusty conditions over those very dry fuels. So that's the part of fire season that I'm the most worried about. And I would say it's usually mid-August that I start making a lot more videos on wildfire, because this is usually the time of the year where we start to see things kick up. And right now it does look like we're having some of that thunderstorm threat for wildfires out there. And part of the reason for that is because of actually El Nino. So El Nino impact on hurricane season. I want to see if we can find a good graphic that shows this. Let's just close that. That's a chart. Not really seeing any good figures there. Let's go to images instead. Alright, this one. So that's La Nina. What I want is the exact opposite of that one. El Nino tropical impacts. That's a very blurry picture. This is actually a good one for you to know what happens during El Nino. You have warm surface water pushing back to the eastern Pacific. So what that's going to do is lead to more rising air in the eastern Pacific, which leads to more hurricanes. There we go. We finally found one. Okay. This is the picture that we're looking for. So, during El Nino, you have your warm water pushed back to the eastern Pacific. For the western Atlantic, so around maybe like Florida, you have fewer hurricanes due to stronger vertical wind shear and trade winds and greater atmospheric stability. But around Mexico, you have more hurricanes due to less vertical wind shear, and you have warmer water out there. Now, if you don't know, in order for a hurricane to happen, the water pretty much needs to be above 80 degrees. So if you have more warm water on the eastern Pacific, makes sense that you have more potential for hurricanes to form. And then that's also, that little fact that I just said there, is part of the reason you never see hurricanes hit California, is because we have a cold current that comes down from Alaska right here. So by the time our hurricane pushes up to California, it no longer has that 80-degree water, at least for now. And then the storm weakens and it falls apart before it actually hits California. And I don't want to say anything false, but has a hurricane ever hit California? I'm pretty sure we have never been hit. Okay, I'm glad I didn't say it. I was wrong. While it's unusual for a tropical storm to hit California, it's not entirely impossible. Last year, Tropical Storm K brought rain, high winds, and flooding to Southern California. Before that, the only known hurricane to make landfall in the Golden State was a Category 1 storm that came ashore near San Diego in 1858. So, our hurricane hasn't hit California since 1858. And whenever you have weather data more than 100 years old, I'm usually pretty skeptical of it, because you don't know how great their measurement systems back back then were, how rigorous their data analysis and storage was back then. But basically that's saying hurricanes don't hit California, but that doesn't mean we're not impacted by hurricanes, as we're seeing throughout the day today. We had some tropical storms off of Mexico that creates moisture that pushes into California, and then it leads to all these lightning fires that we're seeing popping up right here. So let's just update this. I want to see if any of these have jumped up in acreage since we started this video. Not seeing any huge updates there. Now, let's see. Let's go layers. Every time I say layers, I think, oh, all right, this is actually what we're looking for. Satellite map. So where you see, oh, this is going to be exactly what we're looking for. So where you see this kind of whitish color, that's your fire history. And then where you have the orange color, that's where you have some fires going on right now. So the reason I wanted to look at this is to see if we can actually see any towns or cities around these fires. Not seeing any structures around the deep fire. What about the head fire? That's our biggest fire right now, over 2,000 acres. Looks like we do have a road right here. We have Scott Bar. We have some structures in there. Let's look at the wind direction. Interesting. So it does look like the winds are coming from the north right now. So that would try to push the fire down in that direction. So I would say head fire is probably one of the biggest concerns at the moment. And then we also have SRF Smith River Complex up here, 620 acres. There your winds are coming from the west. So, yeah, let's check out any updates on the head fire. That's where we have the evacuation zones. That makes a lot of sense that they have evacuation zones there. And we already read. I believe we already read that. Yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on that one moving forward. So I just want to come back to this website, goldmine of information. Some of the worst wildfires in California history occurred outside that window of October and November, or from April to November. The Camp Fire in 2018, which killed 85 and destroyed the town of Paradise outside Redding in Northern California, was a November fire. And it really wasn't that warm out there. There was just lots of different reasons that that fire became as deadly as it was. Now, how large have wildfires been over time? This could be interesting. Mega droughts and rising temperatures aggravated by climate change have increased the frequency and intensity of California wildfires in recent years. As of 2022, half of the state's 20 largest fires had occurred over the previous 5 years. Of those, 7 occurred in 2020 and 2021. All but 2 of the state's largest fires occurred in the 21st century. So we can go show fires. You got your August complex in August 2020. That was burned over 1 million acres. You had the Dixie Fire in 2021. I covered that about twice a day for what seemed like 2 months. That burned almost 1 million acres. You had the Mendocino complex in 2018. But the main point that this is making is, look how many of your largest wildfires have been in the last 10 to 20 years. Basically, not basically, I think all of them have been in the last 20 years, and most of them have been in the last 5 to 10 years. Now, this says mega droughts and rising temperatures aggravated by climate change have increased the frequency and intensity of California wildfires in recent years. That's what I would call a half-truth. It's definitely true that the drought that we had in California, you can see how bad it was at this time last year versus how good it is right now because of all the rain that we picked up. Drought played a big role. Rising temperatures does play a big role because the warmer it is, the drier your fuels are going to be. And a big thing that we've seen with rising temperatures in California is it's actually more to do with your overnight lows than your afternoon highs. And the reason that's so important is because it's usually overnight when you have a lot of moisture go back into your fuels. So when it's warmer overnight, you don't have that good recovery period, and then wildfire ends up being worse. So climate change is definitely a factor when it comes to the rising temperatures leading to drier fuels, and you could say the aggravation of the drought. But that's not the only reason that we've seen wildfires, more extreme wildfires in recent years. And you could argue that one of the biggest reasons, it's hard to exactly say the exact rank and order of what is the most important, but fire suppression, and then just how many people we have living in California. So part of the reason how many people we have living in California is important is because that has to take a lot more water from the state, and then there's less water for our fuels. We trap it all up in dams and reservoirs instead of having that water go over all of our fuels. On top of that, there's a lot more people living in these wildfire areas. So you can't just allow fires to burn. In the past, fires would start in California and no one would really care because it would just burn in the forest. And a lot of our fuels actually evolved to have wildfire in California. Now, on top of that, then the next piece of information you take from that is because we can't just let the fires burn because it would destroy a town or something like that, then you put the fires out and then it doesn't clear out the fuel. And then because the fuel isn't being cleared out like it was for thousands of years in California, the fuel starts to build up. And then all of a sudden, you have 100 trees sharing the amount of water that should be shared by 10 trees. And then each of those trees gets much less water than it needs. So each of those is going to be more unhealthy, more likely to be hurt by disease or bark beetles. That also makes the drought worse because you have way more fuels and plants sucking up all of the water instead of just a healthy forest that would have actually less trees. And then on top of that, you get what's called crown fires, where instead of it having a lot of surface fires that clear out the ground, and then you have your trees up above that are protected from surface fires, then you get grasses to brush to trees. And then when a fire comes through, it turns into a massive blaze that no amount of firefighting could really hold back. And then that's where you get some of these massive fires that we've seen in the last 10 to 20 years. So as drought, rising temperatures, and climate change made wildfire worse in California over the last 10 to 20 years, definitely. Is it the only thing that has made wildfire worse? Definitely not. So just continuing here, I saw a lot of great charts. So I do want to just go through these, and I'll try to go through these relatively quickly. So 3 major blazes ignited by lightning strikes in August 2020 made that year one of the worst on record for total acres burned. At least 4 million acres burned, blanketing large parts of California with toxic smoke for weeks. And anybody who lives in California remembers that. It's actually the reason I started doing wildfire videos on this channel, was because of 2020. I was living in the Santa Cruz Mountains between the CZU lightning complex and the SCU lightning complex. There was ash falling on the cabin I was living in. And I couldn't really figure out where the fires were or what direction the winds were going or if I needed to evacuate. I wasn't finding that great of information, so I looked at all the different links and sources I could find. I ended up kind of figuring out my own fire danger, and then I thought, I'd got some pretty useful information here. I should probably try to share this with other people. And then other people, I think, found those videos helpful as well. So I'll definitely be doing a lot more wildfire updates and forecasts throughout this season. But that's where you can see 2020 right there. How many? Over 4 million acres burned. And then so far, 2023 has been a very small year, although we are seeing things increase now. So the largest fire in California history was the August complex in 2020, which burned over 1 million acres after lightning strikes across Northern California sparked fires in 7 counties. Cal Fire classifies any wildfire that burns 300 or more acres as a large fire. So we've had 20 so far this year. Since 2008, the destructiveness of large wildfires has been rising, particularly for acres burned per fire. I think that makes a lot of sense, because with more people in California, there's more homes, and there's more things to destruct. But then also with the increase in acreage burned, that is also going to increase the amount of homes that are destroyed. So now I think what I might do, because there's a lot more interesting charts to show throughout this website. I think I'm going to take a quick lunch break, maybe drink some water, maybe go for a quick surf, and then I'm going to come back this evening and we're going to look at the rest of these charts because there's a lot of interesting information here and I actually don't want to rush through it. So yeah, we'll do another little California wildfire research session later today, and if not later today, then definitely tomorrow. So stay tuned. I'll also keep an eye on those wildfires that we have going on across the state, and I'll make sure to keep you guys updated on what's happening there. So hopefully you learned something throughout the course of this video, and thanks for watching.